Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're so excited to have you here. I'm Susan Miller. I'm with Windsor Climate Action, as are several members of the audience. We're very excited to be able to host a speaker series regarding climate change and what we can do in Windsor to address various aspects of it. We have to send out a huge shout out of thanks to the town of Windsor, including Patrick McMahon and Flavia Ray Del Castro. They provided us with a grant that allowed us to put on this speaker series. This is the first. We have another one coming up in June. We'll mention that at the end. But tonight, we are very pleased to introduce Vanessa Brown, the owner and consultant behind Anthro Climate Consulting. Vanessa created Anthro Climate Consulting in 2023 while she was pursuing a master's degree in environmental management. After 7 years of teaching pre-K through high school students, she now teaches entire communities and to understand and prepare for climate change and natural disasters. In addition to this work, Vanessa is the Climate Change and Disaster Relief Consultant for the Access to Resources for Climate Change organization, ARCC. This is a partnership between the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven and the statewide Legal Services of Connecticut to help low-income people prepare for the impact of climate change and natural disasters in New Haven, East Haven, and West Haven. Under ARCC, Vanessa created the Disaster Assistance Guide, which can be found on ctlawhelp.org, to help guide people through disaster legal issues, which is amazing. This free guide contains over 25 articles explaining disaster legal rights, how to apply for assistance, how to replace lost documents, and more. Really vitally important information. It is our great pleasure to welcome Vanessa Brown.
Thank you for the introduction. Hello and welcome.
Hello.
Hi. It's nice to have a responsive crowd. Tonight, I will be speaking about climate change, extreme heat, and health in Windsor and the greater Hartford area. And I will say, the air in here is a bit dry, so I will be taking many water breaks. My name is Vanessa Brown, and I'm currently earning a master's degree in environmental management online from the University of Maryland. I created Anthro Climate Consulting to provide information on the social impacts of climate change and natural disaster. Where typical climate outreach focuses on how climate change is affecting the globe or other countries, I focus on how climate change impacts the daily lives of people in Connecticut. The goal of my outreach is to help people feel alerted to their local climate risk, directed towards realistic actions, and assured they can carry out those actions. In other words, no fear-mongering. We all hold preconceived notions about climate change. So let's frame this conversation to ensure we're all on the same page. According to the Yale Climate Opinion Maps 2024, 73% of people in Hartford County are worried about climate change, but 46% of people think global warming and climate change will have little to no negative impact on their lives. We tend to think climate change doesn't affect people in Connecticut. When we think of climate change, we often picture melting polar ice caps or raging wildfires in the Amazon. While these elements are indeed part of the narrative, tonight I'm here to broaden your perspective on climate change. This discussion is important because climate change is a local issue. Climate change doesn't just threaten distant ecosystems somewhere else, it directly impacts the residents of Windsor, Connecticut. This discussion is important because climate change is a current issue. Climate change is not just a concern for your grandchildren in the future. Climate change is a concern for you today. Most of all, this discussion is important to have because climate change is something we're learning to navigate. Climate change is not the end of the world. Climate change is not the end of humanity. Climate change is a big change. And like many changes in life, I believe we have the capacity to adapt and thrive amidst our new reality. By attending this talk tonight, you are all taking an important step towards understanding and adapting to climate change. The next step is to gain a foundational understanding of just how Connecticut's climate is changing. Since 1850, Earth's average temperature has increased by 2 degrees Fahrenheit. In comparison, Connecticut's average temperature has increased by 3 degrees since 1895, indicating that Connecticut is warming faster than the global average. Connecticut and the rest of New England are within a global warming hotspot. This map from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration highlights in bright red the regions which have experienced accelerated increases in annual average temperature since 1994. In the early 1900s, the average temperature of Connecticut increased at a rate of 0.3 degrees per decade. By the end of the 1900s, this rate accelerated to approximately 1 degree of warming per decade. According to the 2019 Physical Climate Science Assessment Report from UConn, the Northeast is the fastest warming region in the continuous United States. By 2050, the average temperature in the Northeast will increase an additional 1 to 2 degrees. And that is based upon conservative scenarios that assume low greenhouse gas emissions in the future. Climate change is rapidly increasing the annual average temperature in Connecticut. Even as the world works to decarbonize our economy, our best case scenario for climate change in Connecticut is a future that will be significantly warmer. The time to prepare for extreme heat is now. Extreme heat refers to summertime weather that is hotter and more humid than usual. What qualifies as extreme heat varies by location. However, in Connecticut, most people agree that any day with temperatures exceeding 90 degrees is considered extreme heat, especially since the average summer temperature is about 72 degrees. I want to note that the temperature data in this section comes from the National Weather Service station at Bradley Airport because that is the most comprehensive source of climate data local to this area. I was not able to access climate data for Windsor specifically. However, this map here illustrates which areas in the Northeast experienced abnormally high temperatures for June 2024. And using this laser clicker, this dark spot right here includes Windsor and the Hartford area, indicating that last June was on average 3 to 5 degrees warmer than normal. That may seem like a small difference, but it translated into several extreme heat days. There's a lot of information on this graph, but I'm going to walk you through it. The vertical axis on the left is the temperature in Fahrenheit, and the horizontal axis is each day between June 1st and August 31st, 2024. The brown stripe highlights the normal temperature range based upon data from 1991 to 2020. The red areas and the light blue areas are the temperature extremes going back to 1949. Red is the highest temperature recorded on that day, and light blue is the lowest temperature ever recorded on that particular day. The dark blue bars represent the highest and lowest temperature recorded on that specific day during last summer. Quick recap, brown is normal, red and light blue are the records, and dark blue is what was actually happening last summer. Got it?
Yeah.
All right. Looking at this graph, the first thing I notice is how most of the dark blue bars are extending above the brown area, and they're close to that top red line. You guys see what I'm talking about? Thank you. Love a responsive crowd. The dark blue bars are high above the brown section. They're touching the top red line, and that means last summer's temperatures were above average and close to the highest recorded temperatures. Let's see how precise I can get this laser. On this day, right there, it's a little shaky, that's Thursday, June 20th, 2024. The dark blue bar and the red line touch,
Wow.
and that means a record was set on that day, which was for 98 degrees. That was the hottest day of the year and the hottest June 20th that we've ever recorded.
Wow.
I can find the 90-degree line, which is about here, and if I drag my pointer across that line, every section of blue bars above it is a heat wave.
Wow.
So we had one heat wave in early June. That was the hottest heat wave of the year. We had a second heat wave in early July. We had another heat wave in early July. A second heat wave in early July that also set extreme heat records, that blue bar is touching the red line. And we had our final heat wave in late August. So that's 4 heat waves last summer. Oh, I'm sorry, my notes cut off. But in comparison, from 1961 to 2023, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration measured 2 heat waves per year in the Hartford area. So now in the present, you're already experiencing twice the number of heat waves when compared to just a few decades ago. I just want to note, isn't it cool the information that can be pulled from this graph? It just looks like lines and colors, but if you have the background knowledge, this is the full story of what was going on last summer here.
Remember, it's high.
In addition to more heat waves, Hartford County is also experiencing an increase in extreme heat days, which is any day with a temperature above 90 degrees. From 1971 to 2005, Hartford County experienced an average of 6 extreme heat days per year. Now you're experiencing an average of 20 extreme heat days per year. By 2050, Hartford County will experience an average of 30 extreme heat days per year. And by the end of the century, you'll experience an average of 40 extreme heat days each year, with 3 days above 105 degrees. Climate change is a current issue because Hartford is experiencing extreme heat now. You can see we've already increased now from what we were just a few decades ago. And the frequency, duration, and intensity of extreme heat will continue to increase in the near future. In addition, extreme heat is often accompanied by another deadly phenomenon, air pollution. During extreme heat, air quality often deteriorates due to ozone production. Ozone is a molecule made up of 3 oxygen atoms. It serves an essential purpose in our atmosphere. When found up high in the atmosphere, it forms the ozone layer, which effectively shields us from ultraviolet radiation. However, ozone at ground level poses significant health risks as it can be inhaled and cause respiratory issues. Ozone is not directly emitted from any source. Instead, it is a secondary air pollutant formed when volatile organic compounds and nitrogen oxides react in the presence of sunlight. Volatile organic compounds and nitrogen oxides are emitted from various sources, including vehicles, power plants, factories, wildfires, aircrafts, and even products like hairspray. Data from 2019 states that cars and trucks were responsible for 62% of nitrogen oxides and 37% of VOC emissions statewide. Given Windsor's proximity to Bradley Airport, aircraft can also contribute to the levels of VOCs and nitrogen oxides. However, it is more probable that I-91 serves as a significant source of local air pollution containing the precursors for ozone. So the airport is also contributing air pollution, but it doesn't compare to the highway. To monitor air quality, the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection operates a haze camera at Talcott Mountain in Avon. This is the view of Hartford on a clear day, and Windsor would be somewhere over here. So mind you, this is the clear day view.
Yeah.
And do you guys remember that one really hot day last year, Thursday, June 20th? This is the view on that day. This is the view of Hartford on June 20th, 2024, the hottest day of last year. During a heat wave, the air can become stagnant, causing car emissions to bake under the sun. This process facilitates the formation of ozone from volatile organic compounds and nitrogen oxides. And once the ozone forms, it tends to linger above the city until the heat wave subsides. The result is a visible hazy smog that can be viewed from a distance. So what you're seeing now is the ozone that has formed not just over Hartford, but over the entire Hartford area during this really hot day last year. We can go back.
Was that because of the wildfires too from Canada?
That also could have been contributing.
Yeah, that was terrible.
But I will say so this photo, it came from the Talcott Mountain Haze Cam. And as you're going through that haze cam, you guys can access it on the CT Deep website. It shows you, there's multiple pictures taken throughout the day. And so I was able to scan through and look at every photo for last summer. And I was seeing that this haze only lasted during that heat wave, which was from about June 17th, and it broke, I think, on June 19th. And then after that, the haze cleared up. So wildfires do also contribute to air pollution, but it seems to be this is primarily ozone. But thank you for that helpful input. The nearest ozone monitoring station to Windsor is located in East Hartford. On June 20th, 2024, this station recorded ozone levels of 99 parts per billion, significantly surpassing the federal limit of 70 parts per billion, and reaching levels that are potentially unsafe for the general public. On the next slide, there's another scary chart, but once again, I'm gonna walk you through it. We're in this together.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow.
We're in this together. So this is the 2024 ozone summary. The nearest ozone monitoring station to Windsor is East Hartford, but this graph shows every site in Connecticut. But we're only going to look at the East Hartford site. Now, each column here is one day during the ozone season, which runs from May through August. The ozone season aligns with summer because sunlight is what fuels ozone production. And so each box tells you what was the ozone level on that particular day, and the different colors correlate to the health levels. So green is good, 0 to 54 parts per billion. Yellow is moderate. Both green and yellow are still within the federal limit. Once you get above 70 parts per billion, you're surpassing the federal limit, and it starts to be unhealthy for sensitive groups. If it keeps going higher, it gets unhealthy for everyone. And if it gets very higher, now it's even more unhealthy for everyone. So the colors correlate to the health impact of the ozone level that day. And you can see quite a bit of orange here. But here, which is, I think speaks to your question about the wildfires, you can see that heat wave on this chart. That hottest day of the year was June 20th, which is right here. This is that heat wave where there was spiking on the graph. And that leaves reason to believe that these ozone levels had more to do with the heat than with the wildfires. Because as soon as the heat wave broke, which was on that hottest day, immediately the ozone levels went down right as the temperature went down. So this black box here highlights the highest ozone level for the year, which was also on the hottest day of the year. Throughout most of the year, Connecticut remains well within the ozone threshold of 70 parts per billion. However, ozone is formed on hot, sunny days, and during those days, the state experiences approximately 20 days each summer when ozone levels exceed the federal limit. I'm sorry, I had skipped around my notes a bit. But June 20th, 2024, being both the hottest day of the year and having the highest ozone levels is not a coincidence. Ozone is known to flourish under hot and sunny conditions. Connecticut has made significant strides towards reducing ozone levels since the 1980s. Connecticut is divided into two different regulatory groups for ozone management. Windsor is part of the Greater Connecticut area, which is the blue line. And so the red line is the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut region, which includes Fairfield and New Haven counties. The rest of Connecticut is included on this blue line. And this is where we used to be in 1983. And you can see how much it's decreased looking to where we are now. This is right here in 2024. Let's see. And preliminary data from CT Deep indicates that the average amount of ozone for 2024 was 72 parts per billion, you can see here, which is very close to the federal limit of 70 parts per billion. It's not within the limit, but it's the closest that Connecticut has ever been to reaching the limit. And on average, we are being exposed to significantly less ozone than in the past. In the 2020s, Connecticut experiences an average of 20 ozone exceedance days. But in the 1980s, during this period of time, there were up to 100 ozone exceedance days per year. Southwest winds, clear skies, and warm temperatures continue to contribute to ozone exceedances in the state of Connecticut. Although Connecticut has made significant strides in reducing ozone levels, the effects of climate change are contributing to the conditions that promote increased ozone production. So even though our state has worked very hard to decrease our ozone emissions, climate change is creating the conditions that allow those ozone emissions to increase. When ozone levels surpass the federal limit of 70 parts per billion, air quality can deteriorate, becoming unhealthy for everyone. However, certain individuals may be more susceptible to the health impacts associated with extreme heat and poor air quality. Extreme heat is not just uncomfortable, it can be deadly. According to the CDC, extreme heat is the leading cause of weather-related death in the United States. Between 2017 and 2022, extreme heat contributed to 290 hospitalizations and 2,539 emergency room visits in Connecticut. During extreme heat, the body can lose its ability to cool itself down and cause heat-related illness such as heat cramps, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke. In addition, ozone pollution aggressively attacks lung tissue, shortening one's lifespan. As a result, extreme heat coupled with poor air quality can be devastating for sensitive populations. There is an overlap in the populations most vulnerable to extreme heat and air pollution. For this presentation, I'll highlight how older adults experience extreme heat and how people with asthma experience air pollution. People over age 60 account for 26% of the population in Windsor, according to the Windsor Town Profile. Older adults are more vulnerable to heat-related issues because their bodies do not adjust well to sudden changes in temperature, and they are more likely to have a chronic medical condition or prescription that changes how their bodies respond to heat. And I will say, I wrote that statement before I saw who is here today. So I feel like I phrased that a little bit weird.
I was thinking that as you were talking.
But if this isn't targeted outreach, then I don't know what is. As a result, unfortunately, during a heat wave, more than 80% of the people who do die are those over age 60. In addition, 12.4% of adults in Connecticut have asthma, making Connecticut the state with the 4th highest asthma rate in the United States. There is a concentration of high asthma rates in Hartford, and I know it's tricky to see on that map, but the high asthma rates extend into southern Windsor, with these 3 census tracts having between 80 and 90 percentile of people with asthma in the state of Connecticut. And yes, these two account for the 80th and 90th percentile of people with asthma in the state of Connecticut. There's a big, I couldn't fit the full state map on here, but if I did have the full state map, you would see all of Connecticut is yellow and red on that map. Wow. Because there's just such high rates of asthma across our state, and those rates of asthma are concentrated around the cities. So that's how there's a large concentration of asthma rates in Hartford, and that extends into the southern census tracts of Windsor. Hot weather and air pollution aggravate asthma, increasing the risk of asthma attacks. Short-term ozone exposure can cause problems that are immediately noticeable, including shortness of breath, wheezing, sore or scratchy throat, coughing, and lung inflammation. And I will say, I also have asthma, so we're all here in the same room together. Long-term ozone exposure is associated with increased risk of respiratory and cardiovascular mortality, metabolic disorders, reduced fertility, and poor birth outcomes. People with asthma are more sensitive to these impacts. But as ozone levels rise, such as what we saw on June 20th last year, even healthy people can experience short-term and long-term health complications from exposure to ozone. As climate change progresses, extreme heat and ozone exposure may increase, threatening the lives of people with asthma, older adults, and many others across Windsor. So what can you do about it? It's funny, staying hydrated is actually one of the things you can do. That is actually one thing that you can do. For individuals and households, adapting to climate change can look like preparing for ozone exposure by monitoring air quality levels. During the summertime, you can get in the habit of checking the air quality forecast each morning, like checking the weather forecast. The Air Quality Index, or AQI, is used by the EPA to communicate air quality. The AQI is divided into 6 color-coded categories that correspond to different levels of health concern. The Air Quality Index is based upon local monitoring of the 5 major air pollutants, which are ozone, particulate matter, carbon dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, and sulfur dioxide. At the end of this presentation, someone can ask me why I only talked about ozone. That's a great question. Air pollution can change each day and throughout the day, just like the weather. So daily levels of air pollution are monitored, and the AQI gives you one number to describe air pollution on that day. It ranges from 0 to 300 plus, and the higher the AQI, the more dangerous the air pollution levels are. So this is a screenshot from when I checked Windsor's air quality index on May 20th at night, and it was 39, which is in the green region, meaning good, not too bad. In general, ozone exposure tends to decrease. Oh, and it says the main pollutant is ozone. In general, ozone levels tend to decrease in the afternoon and evening as the sun goes down. Yes. Sensitive populations, such as older adults, people with asthma, people who exercise outdoors, should plan their daily activities around the air quality forecast. Ozone is more intense in the afternoon, so on poor air quality days, plan to be outside during the morning. As the AQI increases, you should be spending less and less time outdoors each day. So if the air quality for Windsor said it was 300, then maybe that's a day where you're only outside for 20 minutes instead of doing your 4-hour walk. Sometimes when the weather forecast calls for rain, we cancel or reschedule our activities. It might be the same thing with air quality forecasting. You may have to cancel or reschedule outdoor activities on days when the air quality is at unsafe levels. And like I said, this is a screenshot of Windsor's air quality on May 20th, and you can visit airnow.gov to check the air quality forecast 24/7. For individuals and households, adapting to climate change can also look like preparing for extreme heat and learning to recognize the signs of heat-related illness. When the body heats too rapidly to cool itself properly, or when too much fluid or salt is lost through dehydration or sweating, body temperature rises, and you or someone around you can experience a heat-related illness. It is important to know the symptoms of extreme heat exposure and the appropriate responses. Heat cramps may be the first sign of heat-related illness. Symptoms include painful muscle cramps or spasms in the leg or abdomen. If you or another person have heat cramps, you should take a break in the shade and seek medical attention if the cramps last longer than 1 hour. Heat exhaustion is more serious. Symptoms include heavy sweating and dizziness. If you or another person are experiencing heat exhaustion, get indoors, preferably somewhere with AC, and drink sips of water. Seek medical attention if the person vomits or if their symptoms last longer than 1 hour. Heat exhaustion can lead to heat stroke. Symptoms of heat stroke include slurred speech, rapid heart rate, and fainting. If you or someone else is having a heat stroke, call 911 immediately and get the person into AC quickly. Who would have thought climate change preparation includes first aid? For local governments and community groups, climate adaptation can look like implementing ozone action days. These can be used when ozone levels are too high. Ozone action days are when people join together to intentionally reduce short-term ozone levels. Windsor Climate Action can consider leading the town to carry out actions such as avoiding driving for just 1 day, waiting until after 8 p.m. to do your laundry, or mowing your lawn until after the sun sets, and other such activities that will reduce your greenhouse gas emissions. Ozone action days are beneficial for Windsor because throughout the year, ozone levels are generally within healthy range, but during, as we saw, just the extreme heat days is when the ozone levels are very high. So ozone action days can be used to lower your short-term ozone levels because that's really the issue here. In addition, local governments and community groups can also receive support from the NIH Center for Heat Resilient Communities, which supports communities in determining the best locally tailored solutions to advanced heat resilience. This program is the first of its kind, and it provides technical assistance to governmental and non-governmental entities to help them assess heat risk and vulnerability and develop actionable goals. They also provide grant writing to help you access federal funds to then implement those plans. Certain activities that the Center for Heat Resilient Communities has helped in other cities in the U.S. include additional cooling centers. I know Windsor has 2, but you could probably use a few more. They have also helped with heat wave early warning systems, sometimes organizing people to go door to door and knock on the homes of older adults to make sure they're okay, and other community involvement projects. The Center for Heat Resilient Communities can be a wonderful tool in helping Windsor adapt to the impacts of climate change, which are going to be extreme heat. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you all for attending.
I'll ask it.
Yes.
So why do you only look at ozone and not particulates, all that kind of stuff? Why are they
Wonderful
not-
question. I wonder how you come up with that question. It's a wonderful idea. Well, as that one graph showed, Connecticut's ozone levels are going very steep down. So as of now, let me backtrack. So the federal government, they mainly monitor 6 major pollutants: lead, ozone, particulate matter, nitrogen oxide, carbon monoxide, and sulfur dioxide. I only focused on ozone because ozone is the only air pollutant where Connecticut is above their federal limit. Isn't that good? I saw you all take like a nice exhale. Yeah. So there's 6 air pollutants that are causing a lot of the issues across the U.S. Connecticut has extremely low levels for all 5 of those except ozone. Yeah. I would have included the graphs here, but it would have been kind of wonky to fit on the slides. But if I did have those graphs, let's see if I can pretend to be a graph. Let's say this line is my arm, is the horizontal federal limit. And this shows where Hartford's emissions are. It would be like so far down here, it wasn't worth talking about.
Wow.
Yeah. Isn't that good? This is a good example. Okay. Pretty good. So I only focused on ozone because ozone is the only criteria pollutant where Connecticut has not met the federal standard. Wonderful question. Yes.
Why is New England in that heat zone? Do you know why?
Awesome. I love that question. Thank you. So one of the many reasons why the Northeast is the fastest warming region, one is our proximity to the North Pole, which is the fastest warming region. As I said so far, the Earth has warmed 2 degrees, Connecticut has warmed 3 degrees, the polar region has warmed 7 degrees. Wow. Yeah, so part of that is just our proximity to such a quickly warming area. Another thing that's causing our warming is our proximity to Long Island Sound. Long Island Sound is a wide, shallow body of water, so it warms up very quickly, and then that warmth is blown onto the land. That's also one of the reasons why Connecticut is one of the fastest warming states in New England, and of that, coastal Connecticut is warming a bit faster than areas like Windsor.
It's just geography.
Geography, yeah. It's kind of just where we are within the ocean currents and the air currents. Wonderful question. I see another hand.
I always think that we're just so lucky because with all the things that are going on with tornadoes and hurricanes and floods, and I always think, thank God I live in New England. What are we doing wrong that the ozone level is doing that? I mean, when you look around the United States of America, I feel as though we're okay. Now I'm thinking, are we?
That is a wonderful, you guys are asking great questions. There's so many ways to answer that question, but one I will answer, and I wish I had a chart for it. So Connecticut, once again, we're not in a great place. 50% of our air pollution is blown here from New York. So a good half of it we're not even in control of because it's being blown from outside our state boundaries. Like I said, with ozone pollution, what contributes to those levels in Connecticut, it's those southwest winds. So we have a constant breeze coming from the west, and so we get air pollution from New York City and from western Pennsylvania. There are some parts in Connecticut where they have more air pollution from outside the state than from inside of the state. So even within that, about 40 to 50 from our air pollution is produced within our state. And that's what Connecticut is working on reducing. But it's a wonderful question. Once again, it's geography, just where we are.
Well, I think that transportation is a problem in Connecticut, and pipelines. We have pipelines that go all through east to west and north to south. And those are methane pipelines, and they leak a lot. So we're very vulnerable in that way. And I think big corporations, big fossil fuel corporations like Connecticut, because we're close to the ocean, and they want to sell those gallons of methane overseas. So we're stuck with that.
Are you familiar with Stop Project Maple? I
Yes.
was going to ask, I think you've been to one of their outreach events. As have I too.
Yeah, you could probably talk about that a lot more than I could. But I don't know how other people felt about it, but I was a little alarmed when I heard your presentation. And I like the idea of ozone days,
Yes.
when we would have to take action, like encourage people in the town to stay home more during the day or whatever. Have you ever seen that kind of a program implemented?
That's a good question. I was looking for case studies of ozone action days that have been implemented. And as far as I know, it seems like many states do have a system for kind of announcing it's an ozone action day. Connecticut at our state level does have that system, but right now it's voluntary. So it isn't something that most people follow through with. But right now those alerts are sent out from the state level. I'm not sure many people are aware of those alerts. So that's where there's a good opportunity for local governments to say, hey, today is an ozone action day. Let's actually follow through with it. It's a great opportunity for community groups like Windsor Climate Action to do direct communication, emailing people in your network saying it's an ozone action day. Let's all take this day to decrease our actions, being active on your social media. When it comes to certain like community outreach initiatives, the big part of it is making sure people know about it. And that's where local governments and community groups are wonderful at connecting directly to residents and getting that information out to them. So you guys have a great opportunity to actually implement those ozone action days in Windsor for those extreme heat days, just to get those ozone levels lower for those about 20 days a year. Wonderful question. I'm seeing one more hand here and then one here.
Does the landfill, the dump right outside of Hartford, have an effect on ozone levels or asthma in that southern part of Windsor that you were describing?
That's a good question. As I said, I wasn't able to find data so granular directly to Windsor. But during the summertime, when of course extreme heat is baking down on a dump, it does kind of help accelerate decomposition. And there is more air pollutants likely being released from a landfill on an extreme heat day. But once again, you're near a major interstate highway. So that's going to be where most of your emissions are coming from. It's almost to the point where other sources, they're almost negligible because there's so much traffic on I-91. But yes, on extreme heat days, landfills are also emitting more pollution too. There was one question over here. Oops, sorry.
When you drive by the landfill, it's hard to notice, but you'll see pipes sticking up in various places.
Now.
Yes,
Now.
they're collecting the methane that is leaching out of the old landfill.
But for years and years and years.
It wasn't.
Oh, yes, right.
There is a very significant problem, particularly with that landfill, with runoff water containing high level of pollutants. And there's been an ongoing lawsuit between the MDC and DEEP. DEEP is responsible for the landfill. MDC has to dispose of the polluted water. And MDC wants DEEP to pony up money to help treat that runoff. And that's,
Into the river right now?
yeah, it goes through the MDC's treatment plants and then winds up in the river. They're not able to remove all of those pollutants, particularly a group of chemicals that are sometimes called PFAS, or persistent chemicals that last forever in the environment. There's no good way to put it.
Oh, yeah, it's our polyfluoroalkyl substances that just, once they're in the water, they kind of just stay there. Thank you for adding that information. And there was one more hand we had over here.
Yeah, our Windsor Garden Club, every summer, we have an educational table at the farmer's market, which we're telling people about invasives and they ask us plant questions and things like that. But where could we get pamphlets or information that we could give to people about climate change, or even the things about recognizing heat stroke, or do you have like an umbrella organization where we could get free handouts to give out at the farmer's market?
That's a wonderful question. I would say in doing this outreach, I think the CDC has the best already made pamphlets. They have a whole section of their website that talks about heat risk, and they have handouts ready for every sensitive population you can think of. If left-handed people are more extreme to heat risk, the CDC has a whole brochure about it. So definitely check out the CDC's website. A lot of their handouts, they're multilingual, they have really fun graphics, and they explain things really well. So definitely the CDC's website. And I just do want to say the idea of like handing out pamphlets at the farmer's market, there's also another way where you can inform people of action days, ozone action days. It's a great idea. Another hand?
Heat.gov is a great website.
Oh yeah, can't forget heat.gov, of course.
On a positive note, we've reduced ozone layers tremendously since the 1980s. What's the reason for that?
So I'm sorry, can you repeat your question again? I just want to make
Your
sure.
graph said since the 1980s, we've reduced ozone levels tremendously in Connecticut. Just curious as to what mitigation programs or whatever was the cause of that reduction.
That's a good question. That was the Clean Air Act. That was the power of the Clean Air Act.
To swing the other way.
Oh no. But so let me trying to think. So New York and LA and kind of around Pittsburgh, they have some of the highest ozone levels in the nation. Really just all around air pollution, highest levels in the nation. And they were put in a separate category for air pollution from other states in the country, where there were more aggressive measures that were made. Things like changing the type of gasoline that we use. Now we all have to get those emissions tests, which remind me I just got my notice in the mail for that. But due to very aggressive policy, Connecticut was able to severely decrease their ozone pollution. In fact, on CT Deep website, I wish I had it now, but there's that same chart I showed you with the ozone levels, and then it shows when each policy was implemented, and how you can directly see the impact policy had on the ozone levels. So yeah, it was the Clean Air Act.
There's a specific attack that's going on in Washington right now that's challenging this. The Clean Air Act came in, and it gave those areas that Vanessa mentioned, particularly California, driven from the problems they had in LA, allowed those states to set lower standards for pollution than the rest of the country. Connecticut chose to follow those more aggressive standards set by California. The feds just declared that California is no longer to have more stringent standards than was set nationwide.
Oh.
Therefore, the protections that we have here will go away.
I wasn't aware of that. Yeah, that's concerning. I haven't been keeping up with what's happening in LA, but if I had like an air pollution map of the United States, it would be like, you would see a bunch of red around New York City where there's high levels. You'll see some red around Pittsburgh, and then the air pollution is so bad in LA, it's purple there. Like they had to invent new colors just to express how much air pollution is in LA. And even with the Clean Air Act, Connecticut, we've reduced our air pollutants a lot, but the LA area is still struggling with that. So it's really surprising to hear that their regulations have been peeled back because their air pollution is already so terrible with those regulations. Yes, but thankfully in Connecticut, of those 6 major air pollutants, it's really just ozone that is our major concern. And like I said, the federal limit is 70 parts per billion, and we're at 72. And so we are being exposed to way less ozone than people were back in the 80s. Any more questions? Another hand?
With global warming, is that increasing the amount of pollutants in the air?
So global warming, it's not necessarily increasing. It's tough to say because ozone, it's a secondary air pollutant that comes from nitrogen oxides and VOCs. We humans are emitting those, and the sunlight allows those to turn into ozone. So more sunlight facilitates the process of ozone, but it's not, it's not really creating it, but it's just creating the conditions that allow ozone to flourish. I think I had a chart in here that showed that. Let's see, I had a nice graphic. Yep, here we go. So these are nitrogen oxides. These are volatile organic compounds. Both of these are emitted by humans, mainly from cars. So we already have this air pollution already floating around in the air, but then the sun turns on and those bake into ozone. And so global warming is causing more sun, but it's us humans that are already putting those precursors into the air, if that helps to answer your question a bit.
Okay.
Another question?
Regarding exposure to ozone, you had an intermediate exposure and a longer-term exposure. Can you explain what you meant by intermediate and long-term?
That's a good question. I'll go to that slide. Let's see. Oh, here we go. So the effects of ozone exposure, you can feel them immediately, within minutes or hours. When you're first exposed to it, you might feel like an itchy throat or watery eyes. But if you are living somewhere, maybe like if you're living in LA, and then you're having chronic high levels of exposure, at that point you're being exposed for years at a time. So short-term ozone exposure is for hours, maybe days, and long-term exposure looks at years.
Okay.
Another question?
As you're talking about this, I can't help but think about people who work outside.
I know, yeah.
What, have anybody done any studies on, people that,
I don't know.
other than they're screwed?
Currently, OSHA is looking at working conditions in extreme heat, not just for people who work outdoors, but also for people who work indoors. I'll talk more about that in a minute. But for people who work outdoors in trades kind of like maybe construction or street vendors, unfortunately, they're dealing with lost work time, where sometimes where it's so hot, they're not allowed to work, so they don't get paid for that day. Part of what I do in this outreach is helping to kind of encourage us to adapt to climate change and changing some of our habits. We can look at places like Phoenix, which already deal with extreme heat on a regular basis, and they handle it by doing construction at night. So most of the times in Phoenix, construction crews don't come out until maybe 8 or 9 p.m. when it's cooler, and they'll work until 6 p.m. And that's become the norm in their area. So that's just one example of a cultural change that you might have to see Connecticut taking on as we're now dealing with extreme heat too. But also, indoor workers are also dealing with extreme heat too. On the town profiles, I was able to see that the largest industries in Windsor are metal fabricating and warehousing. So those are two areas where OSHA is actively doing research on how does extreme heat impact these people. And OSHA is putting out recommendations for supervisors on how can they be aware of heat-related illness, how can they make sure people have breaks, and how can they make sure people have shade. I'm sorry, don't want to talk too much, but I have a little bit more tidbit to say about the working conditions. Another example is California, where they're used to having very hot weather. They have additional worker protections for extreme heat. So in California, once it reaches a certain temperature, let's say 100 degrees, it will say, well, everyone gets a mandatory second break today. And that's something, since they're so used to extreme heat, they have that built into their worker protection laws. So that's maybe another adaptation we might see in Connecticut. We might have certain worker protections that kick in when a certain temperature is reached in order to protect people working inside and outside. That was a long answer, but it was a great question.
And again, the feds just sued California to disallow those extra breaks.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
And they're trying to get rid of OSHA too.
I know.
So, yeah, right.
Another question?
On our local weather, we have these weather alerts, and it's always about the pollen and everything. Is there a way that people can be notified about the ozone? Would that help? I mean, have you looked into that, or would that scare us all to death? You know?
No, I don't think it would scare
We watch the
people.
news every day, and they tell us, the pollen count, so be careful if you blah, blah, blah. But if I were to turn on my news and they tell me that the ozone level today is dangerous, so stay indoors, I would say, oh my gosh, what is that? But after listening to Vanessa, now I know what it means. But Has anyone ever done anything like that?
I think weather apps, a lot of weather apps
Yeah,
give you
but I'm
that
saying on the news,
information.
not weather apps, just when you watch the news every day.
I don't watch the news,
Oh,
I just
okay.
look at the weather app.
I'll stop watching the weather then.
Sometimes on the news, they do discuss the air quality index. But on weather apps, especially if you're using like Apple Weather, typically you can see it. Like I said, you might have to get into the habit of checking the air quality forecast the same way you check the weather forecast. In my intro, you shared that I used to teach for 7 years. I know I don't look young enough to have a second career, but I don't look old enough to have a second career, but I do, almost 30. And when I was teaching, we would regularly check the air quality index.
Yes.
We would check it multiple times a day, every time before we took the kids outside. It became part of our habit. We would check it in the morning, then we would tell the kids, okay, the air pollution's not so good today. We're only gonna go outside for 20 minutes. Or we're gonna change our schedule, we're gonna go outside right now because we can't do it later in the afternoon. We've kind of just got into the habit of just regularly checking it. You can, especially during the summer, though, your weather app will have actually an air quality portion if you scroll down.
Okay.
Yes.
Kind of tied into that, there's all the school sports, and especially like with the fall sports that start early in August to kind of condition during the hottest days of the year. And I'm wondering if I don't know if Windsor has any flags to say like, okay, we're not going to practice on the field today, we're going to do drills inside. I don't know if that's a thing, but is that something that you would recommend, or is that something other schools are doing? Do you know?
That's a good question. Once again, it has been an issue of extreme heat in high school sports, but also even in professional sports.
Yeah.
It's really anyone doing vigorous activity outside, you're at risk for heat-related illness. And unfortunately, in the Olympics, just the past Olympics, I've learned that the Olympics now hires people to kind of analyze the climate to help decide how should they schedule their sporting events. And so that's kind of an example of like a cultural change that the Olympics is having for climate change. Maybe in Windsor, there might be a cultural change within schools, like when temperature reach 100 degrees, all sports are automatically inside. It's small tweaks like that that can make big changes in adapting to climate change. Kind of just expecting extreme heat to happen and having plans in place. And that can also be used for schools too.
Thank you.
Oh, see another question?
One last question. When ozone dissipates, where does it go?
What'd you say?
When the ozone dissipates, when it clears up, does it break down and turn into a different molecule, or where does it go?
That is a wonderful question. I took a course on air pollution, and I wrote a whole paper on where ozone goes. I was very, very excited about that information. So during a heat wave, what usually happens is there's a lot of pressure over the city. And that pressure is kind of preventing wind from moving around, and that prevents the ozone from leaving. But once that pressure dissipates, the winds come in, and the ozone is usually pushed somewhere else. That's how I said we get a lot of our air pollution from other states. It's being pushed here, then it's blown here, usually goes over Rhode Island, and then it goes out into the ocean. Ozone is also a greenhouse gas. Ozone stays in the atmosphere, I want to say for a couple of decades before it dissipates.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Just hanging around.
Yeah, so kind of it hangs around and causes problems in different areas.
Wow.
Another question?
So you're talking about the thermal inversions over the cities, right? Those are partially caused by the heat island effect, right?
Yes, they are. And usually when I'm doing outreach in New Haven, I do talk more about the urban heat island effect. But that's not too much of a factor in Windsor.
Really?
UConn runs the Connecticut Institute for Resilience and Climate Adaptation, CIRCA. On their website, they have a heat vulnerability index, and it will show you where urban heat islands are in Connecticut. That's a map that I did check for this presentation. And a lot of heat being absorbed in Hartford, but not so much in Windsor. Windsor isn't as dense as some of the cities are. Even driving around before I came here, lovely town, lots of trees. Lots of trees, lots of greenery, lots of grass, lots of lawns. And so that is something that makes you guys more resilient to heat, is that you have I would have to check the tree cover, but I would guess that you have more green space than pavement is almost how it looks in Windsor. So the urban heat island effect, that's more of an issue in Hartford, not so much in Windsor. You guys are a bit more rural than urban, or a bit more closer to being rural than urban. Any more questions? Did I run you guys all out?
Thank you.
All right,
Very
well,
good.
That's all. Thank you.
Great. And before we break up, please eat a lot more food. And also, we will be having our second speaker of our series is going to be on June 18th at the library. It will be Kip Kolasinska? Did I do that right? I don't know. He's going to talk more about kind of agriculture, food, impacts of climate on those systems and things we can do about that. So hope to see you all then as well. And again, thank you again, Vanessa. Another round of
Leave me, my darling, I don't remember my name.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you caught the beginning.
Come back to me when I'm sane again.
Make it feel just more relevant, less about polar bears. Yeah.
The sun is setting
Exactly.
over old time. And one more year standing now silence is golden and free and wasted on the lonely. Fills up our hearts.
It was a great plan. It even has followed me. But it was a nice plan for
Empty rooms, but it won't fit.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for your questions.
No, just one fit. We'll be making our homes in the knees of the standing down, sleeping crying. So call me darling on a good day. Call me by my real name. The one that I really can't say. But hope to hear one day. Hope to hear one day. You can find me, my darling.